Welcome to our class in Texas regulations. This is one of two videos for this class, and of course, there will be some additional reading and a quiz at the end. So, this class is designed for anyone working in early childhood or out of school time in the state of Texas. We will talk about regulations in licensed childcare, in school age programs, and in home-based programs. We will focus more time on licensed childcare centers because there are more of them, but we will touch on all three topics today. So let's just talk a little bit about who Texas Director is. We're hosting you in this class, and we have been training people working in early childhood and out of school time for more than 20 years, not quite 30, in the state of Texas and around the country and the world. We love training, and we know that regulations is kind of a boogeyman. And Texas regulations are not the shortest minimum standards of any state. They are pretty darn lengthy at almost 300 pages for childcare licensing alone, and there are other types of regulations in addition. So we want to make sure that we're supporting you. We've also written a best-selling book that you can see here on this slide. If you know somebody who is an early childhood leader, director, head of school, and you think they might be a little bit overwhelmed and need that feeling of, oh, I've got this, I think this is a great book for them. How many times have you heard a kid say, "You're not the boss of me," or "You're not my mom"? So sometimes we grown-ups feel the same way. We feel like somebody who's giving us correction is not the boss of you. But some of them really are. So let's talk about who the boss of you is. Who are the bosses of you? Who are the bosses of you? Because just because you don't know what a rule is doesn't mean you can't get in trouble for it. We all know someone, and it may be you, who has gotten a ticket for something when driving a car that they didn't even know was a rule. Does that mean they don't give you the ticket? Nope. They still give you the ticket even if you didn't know it was a rule. And the same thing can happen in your program. So be forewarned. So the regulations start at the rules, the standard operating procedures, the handbooks you have inside your program. Then we go out. Well, before we go on, I can't train you on those. I don't know what yours are. So then we go out to the next level, which is probably your municipal regulations, your city, town, or village rules and regulations. Not every program is in a municipality, so not everybody is affected by those rules. So we have a fair amount of overlap between what might be a municipal rule and what might be a county rule. So we'll talk about those as well. And then there are the state of Texas regulations. And of course, if we go out beyond that, there are the federal rules and the international rules. But we're not going to be addressing federal or national today. So let's start with those local regulations, those city, town, or village rules. In addition, you might have rules from a property owner's POA. So association, property owners association, that might regulate things about where trash has to be kept or how you have to keep up your property. But that's going to be entirely local, so we're going to leave that. Best they can. So we have city ordinances to do that. They are the zoning laws. What types of businesses or homes can be in this particular spot? So if you're looking to expand a program, it's a great idea to go in and check on the zoning. Most of you are already in existing programs, so it's not particularly relevant to you, but it's still a good idea to keep up to date on any changes to zoning because it might make it so that nobody else could have a child care center in your area, which could be an advantage to you now, but might be a challenge if your business wants to change ownership at any time. The next big one is the building code. So that is, where do there need to be exits? Where do we need to have windows? How much lighting do we need to have? What kind of smoke detection, carbon monoxide detection, all of those kinds of things are going to be part of the building code. How does the building need to be built? And what do I need to do if I want to add a sink? So I'm going to need to go get some permits, and they're going to make sure that you are doing it up to the current standard based on current science. So building codes are based on the science of what we know will keep that building as safe as possible. And those change because we learn new things. Or maybe your area becomes more prone to fire or flood or tectonic shifts, earthquakes. So there may be changes due to weather pattern changes or tectonic changes. There's also probably rules about parking. How many parking spaces do you need to have at your child care center? Do they need to be marked? Do you need to have those lines painted in your parking area or those concrete gizmos that indicate this is where one car gets parked? What do you need as far as parking? Again, these change from time to time, so you need to keep up to date if at all possible. We've also got rules about signage. How close to the road can it be? Can it be perpendicular? Can it only be parallel? How big can it be? Some towns even have rules about what colors your signage can be. So again, probably not an issue because you've probably got an existing program, but it's just an interesting thing to know that there are city rules about what kinds of signs can be where. If you were wanting to put those fluttery banners or a banner hanging on a fence at your program, this goes into the signage rules in your municipality. Or sometimes they have what is called bandit signs, those little yard signs. There's probably rules about where those can be, how big they can be. So before you put up any of those banners or yard signs, make sure you check the rules. Then we've got code compliance. And this is the thing that a lot of homeowners associations get very caught up in, which is how tall can the grass be? Where does the trash need to be stored? Where can abandoned vehicles be stored? All of that kind of stuff. So code compliance is primarily concerned with, again, keeping the municipality safe from dangers with rodents and snakes and things like that. So usually there's some sort of rule about how tall grass and other plants can be close to businesses or residents. And there's also probably some rules about waste management, which is, of course, our next item. The purpose of these rules is to keep people safe in your community. Then we have waste management, whether the city is in charge of picking up trash at your program or not, because some cities don't pick up business trash at all. They still have rules about how the trash needs to be stored and removed. What is the schedule? What kind of lid it needs to have, etc. If you're in an area that has bears, hello Valley, it probably needs to be stored differently than in areas that do not have bears, for instance. Okay, and then our last one is environmental hazards. And this comes up when you have a problem with feral animals, or when you have people just dumping trash or abandoned items. All of those are environmental hazards. People are, emptying out their oil pans in the street. All of that would be environmental hazards. So, environmental hazards don't have a huge impact on your program from the city ordinance perspective, except that some cities do have rules about programs that are focusing on children not having lead paint or asbestos. So if that is relevant in your municipality, you need to know that before you do any work on your walls or floors, because there could be asbestos or lead paint in either of those. If you are making changes to anything in your building, if you are moving a fence, if you are adding a door, adding a window, adding plumbing, adding electricity somewhere, taking an electrical outlet out, moving a light switch, adding a doorway, window, any significant change in your building, you need to clear it with your city code compliance. When you do that, you need to record what you heard from the people at the city. You need to write it down or record it if you did it as a phone call or a conversation in person. Then you need to write down that it happened. Then you need to file that away. So we record it, we record that we recorded it, we file it away, and we keep it. Because if you emailed somebody at the municipality and said, hey, I'm going to move my fence from here to here, and they said, oh yeah, that's fine, that doesn't mean that that is fine. It means that they said it's fine. And we need to have a record of who told you it was okay to move that fence, when they said it, and exactly what they said. So it is best to follow up any phone calls with an email saying, hey, just confirming our phone call. You said that I could do X and Y. If I am mistaken about our conversation, please let me know by, and give them a date that they need to tell you if you misunderstood them. Okay? So record it, record that you recorded it, file it, and then keep that as long as you are still in that building. Now, let's look at the county. Again, there's going to be some overlap. And I will say that in some municipalities, some of the county rules are taken over by the municipalities, but that doesn't happen very often. So, again, the focus is on keeping the citizens healthy and safe. That's not new. Okay, let's look about these. There may be zoning rules. There may be building code. But here's where it gets different. In Texas, most counties have the health department. It is in most counties a health department role, not a municipal role. And so the county health department is who you call or email when someone associated with your program has a reportable communicable disease. For instance, someone at your school calls to tell you that they have the flu, so they're not going to be there. So a parent calls about a child, or one of your employees calls you. The flu is a reportable disease, influenza, and so we need to notify our local health department that we have one case of influenza. The county health department is tracking outbreaks of certain diseases so that they can see if they need to have additional efforts. For instance, maybe they need to have a flu shot drive where they're encouraging more people to get their flu shots. We had a lot of this during the COVID-19 pandemic, right? They wanted to know every child who had COVID-19, every staff person who had COVID-19. They want to know where those are so that if they need to close down a business or close down a part of a business for a part of time for a quarantine, they can do that. This is a power they've had forever. We just saw it happen a lot more during COVID-19. This is a state law that you need to report these communicable diseases. If you do not have a list of the reportable communicable diseases, reach out to your county health department and they will send you a copy of the current list of reportable communicable diseases. Additionally, your county health department does annual inspections of your child care center. The inspections will be more in depth if you have a food program, if you are cooking at the program, than if you do not cook at the program. But even if you don't cook, the health department has to come out and inspect once a year. There are a few counties in the state that do not have this. If that's the case, there's a procedure you have to go through with licensing so that you have filled out all your paperwork about that. You will need to go into a portal or go into the office and say, hey, it's time for my health inspection. They're not going to show up on their own. You need to go in and request your inspection, and there's probably a fee associated as well. Okay? Then we have the fire marshal. Again, usually this is a county role, but in some cases the city has taken that on. But I put it in county because generally it is a county role to have the fire marshal. So the fire marshal is working with the building code enforcement. So they're going to make sure that you are doing what needs to be done to keep people safe in case of a fire. So they may require you to add additional lighting or add additional signage for fire exits, things like that. But they're going to, again, like the health department, need you to once a year contact them and schedule your annual inspection. If you have any gas plumbing in your building at all, before the fire marshal comes, you need to have had a gas line inspection by a local plumber. So you have the plumber come out, do the gas line inspection, and then the fire marshal will come out. If you have a linked or monitored smoke detection system, they may need for that inspection to be done by your alarm company before they come out and do the inspection. They're going to be looking for clear fire exits, appropriate signage, that your smoke detectors have been tested. They're going to be looking at your fire extinguishers. If you need a complete list of what either the health department or the fire department is going to inspect, you can request a copy of the inspection form before they come out so that you know what they're looking for. Okay? Then we get code compliance, same as it is for the municipal, because not everybody lives in a city, town, or village. And if you live in the country, we still need to protect people from a rodent infestation or a whole bunch of rattlesnakes setting up camp somewhere. So we still have code compliance issues. There are still rules about waste management and about environmental hazards. Okay, guys, we're on to state regulations. I know that's what you've been waiting for this whole time. Everybody's super excited about state regulations, right? You're excited, right? Not worried. Okay, so these are some of the state agencies that directly impact childcare. I have left childcare licensing to about halfway through. I know that's the biggest concern for a lot of people, but it's not the only one, so I want you to focus in on each of them as we go through. So, the Texas Workforce Commission, one of the biggest ways it interacts with childcare is that they manage the Child Care Block Grant Fund in Texas, which means that they help funnel funds into child care programs. Child care programs are eligible to receive child care block grant funds if they provide, well, everybody is eligible to do it as long as you don't have significant negative marks from child care licensing. And it provides funding for families who are employed but have a hard time paying financially for the services of childcare, so low-income families or families of people who are full-time students. And this applies to childcare centers, family homes, and family arranged care. So it can be any of those things. If you don't know about CCS, which is what we call it here in Texas, please reach out to me, Carrie at Texas Director, and I'll be happy to explain more about how CCS works. The other TWC functions. So that's only one of the 3 ways that childcare is impacted by Texas Workforce Commission. The other main one is that the Texas Workforce Commission is in charge of enforcing Texas employment laws, all of them. Childcare is not governed by federal minimum wage. It is governed by the state minimum wage. There are rules about overtime. There are rules about how you communicate to people. All of those are administered by the Texas Workforce Commission. If you are not if you're a director and you are not on the Texas Workforce Commission employer newsletter, I suggest getting on. Same if you're an owner. If you work in a child care program in another way, you may not need it, but I think all directors and owners should probably be on that newsletter list because they will talk about Texas employment law in various different ways. The third way that TWC interacts with childcare is that they manage the Texas Unemployment Fund. So they manage one of the taxes that you have to pay for your employees, and that is the Texas Unemployment Insurance Fund. Every quarter, you send in a payment to TWC for your unemployment taxes, and then if somebody applies for unemployment with the state will reach out to you and say, hey, this person wants unemployment. Do you think they qualify? This is the information they gave us. So you need to open any email from TWC as soon as it comes in. That becomes a number 1 priority. Same as if it is a piece of mail that comes to your business. If it is from Texas Workforce Commission, you want to open it right away because there are people who apply for unemployment from your business who never even worked for you. So you need to be paying attention to email that comes from TWC. Okay, let's move on from that. Okay, state fire marshal. Didn't we just do the fire marshal? Yes, we did. But the state fire marshal helps to create the building code. So the county fire marshal helps to enforce the building code. The state fire marshal helps to write the building code. And if you are going to have a linked monitored smoke detection system or a smoke detection system with fire suppression, meaning a sprinkler system, they're going to need to review the plans for that system before it's installed. So you don't deal with them on a day-to-day basis or even a year-to-year basis, just occasionally when you are upgrading your safety precautions. Okay, we've reached the childcare licensing. Now, we're going to do a whole separate video that's going to go a little bit more in depth into childcare licensing, but we're going to talk about it a little bit right here. So, when you're working with childcare licensing, you want to have a positive relationship with your licensor. If you are the director or owner, I want you to reach out to them, set the stage. Every time you have something that you need to talk to them about or they talk to you about, record it, record that you recorded it, and file it, and then keep it. Okay, so those same rules that we used with other types of regulators, we're going to use with childcare licensing. If you are somebody who is working in a classroom, so you're not the director, you're not the owner, I need you to know that childcare licensing is there to be a support for your center. It is not their job to catch you doing bad. It is their job to help keep the kids safe. And so if they cite you for something that you didn't know was a rule, did we talk about that earlier? Yes, we did. Then they're trying to educate you and remind you that it is our primary duty to keep these kids healthy and safe. Okay? So do not think of them as the enemy. Think of them as a partner in keeping the kids healthy and safe. If you get cited in your classroom for something that your director has been reminding you of, that is a big deal because your director was reminding you of this statewide law. You were choosing to not do it, and now the regulators are coming in and reinforcing that you have to do what is in minimum standards, because what's in minimum standards is a state law. So if you are not doing what is in minimum standards, you're breaking a law. But they're there to remind you of it or to educate you on it if you don't already know. Okay, minimum standards change all the time. Well, not all the time, not every day, but there are 5 different ways that minimum standards change. The most common way for minimum standards to change is that there has been a law passed in one of the years that the legislature is operating. So every other year, the state of Texas legislature meets, and frequently they pass bills that affect childcare. So every other year on September 1st, there's a good chance that minimum standards will change because there's been some law that's been passed that has changed something in minimum standards. The second most common, I would say, is that there has been some change to a federal law that impacts childcare. And so because that federal law has changed, we have to change standards. Then the third way that minimum standards change is that there is a required by state law review of minimum standards that has to take place every few years. And that is a very long, systematic process that everyone working in childcare can be part of if they want to, or they can completely ignore it. It's up to you. But that periodic review happened in 2022 and 2023. So we got a new set of minimum standards right after that. So that will happen again in a few years. Then there is the somebody did something dumb way that minimum standards changes. So somebody did something that we can't believe anybody would do. Common sense would say you shouldn't do that. And so there's a lawsuit or there's a serious injury. And so childcare licensing goes, okay, we need to make it very clear that that thing can't be done anymore. And so they change minimum standards because somebody did a dumb thing. Okay? And then the last one happens very rarely, and that is that there is an executive order. So the head of the department that is currently regulating childcare licensing says there's an emergency, and so we need to change some standards for a period of time. Now, this could be for the whole state or it could be for a region. It happens more often for a region, so an area that's hit by tornadoes or hurricanes or something like that may have some of the rules waived for a period of time. So if you're in an area where there's been a lot of flooding because of one of those things or a lot of damage, they may waive the requirement for the children to go outside every day because right now it's not safe outside because there's too much flooding. That's an example of that. Then there was the statewide changes to the regulations that we experienced during COVID. That's the only time I've known of a statewide executive order changing regulations. There probably have been others, but that's the only one I can think of right now. So there are different reasons that minimum standards can change. Don't take it personally and just roll with the punches. If you are concerned about changes that are happening in minimum standards, come back to Texas Director. Every time this happens, we have trainings to help people understand the changes to minimum standards. You want to use this information about minimum standards, not just how minimum standards change, but general information about minimum standards in parent meetings, in staff meetings, and with the children, because sometimes children want to do something and we want to reinforce. I would love to let you sit in soiled clothing because you don't want to get up and go change because you've had a toileting accident, but unfortunately it's against the law. So sometimes we can use those regulations with the kids. Most of the time, we're going to be using it with the staff and with the clients. No, you cannot bring your child in with 102-degree fever. It's against the law. I'm sorry, we can't do that. You cannot have your cell phone out while working in the classroom. It's against the law. Okay? So we use the information you learn about minimum standards in lots of ways throughout your program. Here's an example of something that you might use in one of those trainings with your staff. Give them some examples of things to dig through minimum standards to try to find. Could we use something like this at our program? So it's a splash inflatable. Can we use it? Can we not? Have them go through minimum standards and find out. Have them find out 7 different things that make it such that a child has to wash their hands. Why is it that you are a big old meanie and won't let the kids touch the garter snake in the garden? Well, that's in minimum standards. And then have them look up what are things that you have to tell licensing within 2 days. One of those things is that one of them has been arrested. That doesn't mean that they're going to lose their job. It means that licensing is going to run a new background check and make sure that whatever they were arrested for is not a problem for them being in childcare. Okay? So this is an example of something that you might do in one of those meetings. Now, let's move on to the next regulatory agency, which is the State Department of Agriculture. If you have the federal food program, CACFP, then the State Agriculture Department is who manages that. And so they have access to any of your records relating to food service. And then here's just a little bit of math for those who don't know about CACFP. The last state agency that has oversight into childcare is TCEQ. TCEQ is concerned with childcare because of water quality issues. So they have to have a record of every licensed and registered childcare program in the state of Texas. And if you are not using municipal water, if you are on a well, you have to do water quality testing. Everyone can do free water quality testing for their child care center with TCEQ. So if you are concerned that there might be lead in the pipes or bacteria, if you have any concerns at all about the water quality at your child care center, you can take a sample and send it off to TCEQ and they will test it for you for free. This is a great thing to do once a year. Do it the same time that you're renewing your insurance for your program. It's a great thing to do. But anyone can request, anybody who works at the center can request that kit and do water quality testing for your child care center. So it's a great resource, and they are working with municipalities to make sure that municipal water stays up to the quality that we need for young children. Okay, that wraps up the class. If you enjoyed this class, I guess it doesn't wrap up the class. It wraps up this session of this class. If you enjoyed this or you would like to learn more from me and Kate, we have a podcast called Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie. You can take a screen grab of this and listen to us. We put out a new episode every Tuesday. And maybe you're somebody who would like to be a guest on our podcast. If so, reach out to us, Carrie at texasdirector.org. And that's how you spell my name if you didn't already know. And you can always reach out to Texas Director and we'd be happy to help you with providing in-person classes at your program. We have online courses available and we do have director coaching and consulting. Thank you so much for your time, and I will see you in the next session where we talk about licensing.